welcome to another episode of AP Taylor Swift, the podcast for Swifties who like to dive a layer deeper into the music. So lean in close, turn up your volume, because class is in session. We're your hosts. I'm Maansi.
I'm Jenn.
And I'm Jodi.
And we are your unofficial professors of Taylor Swift.
Welcome back to another episode of AP Taylor Swift. Today, in honor of Earth Day, we are doing an episode on Transcendentalism, Mother Earth, nature as divine, all of the above. We're going to get into a little bit of all of it. We have done an episode before on eco-criticism. It is one of our earliest episodes and probably one of my favorites. So that's another great one aligned to nature and Earth and Earth Day. So if you haven't ever listened to that one, go back and listen. We apologize for the audio quality.
It's episode 7. So when we say early,
that's
we're
an
not
OG.
kidding.
That's we were still in our debut era on that one. So go back and listen to that one. I think it's just a really fascinating and fun conversation. It'll be interesting to see today how this conversation is either alike or different from that. But before we get into the Taylor Swift of it all, Maansi, you want to tell us a little bit more about our topic today and how we're going to approach this conversation?
Yeah, Transcendentalism is a movement that started in the United States, and very specifically, it started in the New England area, so northeast of the country, and it starts in the 19th century, so mid-1800s, and a little bit of framing as to just what was happening in the United States at that time. It was like peak industrial revolution, the steam engine, a lot of factories opening up, big migration of people moving from rural areas of the country to the cities to work. And New England in particular was very affected by this because close to the coast, there was a lot of shipping, factory work happening, big cities like New York, and even surrounding areas, anywhere where there was a kind of a city environment. It was just becoming industrialized at alarming rates. And that was really changing the fabric of the way that American society had been constructed. This was happening also in Europe, by the way, as well. And in our eco-criticism episode, we talked a little bit more about what was happening in Europe. In particular, there were a few Americans that lived in the kind of extended Boston area. Ralph Waldo Emerson is considered the father of Transcendentalism in America, or one of the key essayists, key voices of this movement. Henry David Thoreau was another prominent figure who did many, many writings. And there are also a lot of other figures like Margaret Fuller, Elizabeth Peabody, Amos Alcott, also related to Louisa May Alcott, Theodore Parker, George Ripley, Walt Whitman is also very famous. A lot of people that you will notice who write a lot about nature. And the reason that that is important and an important thread is that Transcendentalism is very much a literary movement that was rooted in taking inspiration from our natural world around us and being reliant, believing in the good of people, believing in the good of nature and just the miracle and beauty that is nature around us, and being able to just live off of what is around us in our natural environment rather than artificial things that have come up as a result of the corruption of man, so to speak. And so Thoreau, for example, is very famous for having moved away from his little town, and he didn't really move that far for what it's worth. He just moved like into the woods in his neighborhood. He could literally walk back to town. But that's where he wrote his very famous book, Walden. There was a lake called Walden, and he wrote a book about his time living there.
On Walden Pond? Is that the
Walden
full title?
Pond, yeah. He lived in a tiny little log cabin, and he was totally self-reliant. Didn't really need any frills, bells, whistles. He just kind of lived in the woods by himself and wrote a lot and thought a lot and took these walks in the woods and used that time to think and just be kind of self-sustaining. There is an element of divinity, and it kind of takes on like a little bit of a religious meaning through this movement, because Transcendentalists really believed that the divine, quote unquote, is present in nature and humanity, and it's all around us. And so rather than putting stock in a God that judges us after the fact, this was a little bit more of like, find the divinity all around us. It's not anti-Christian. So this is where it's like gets a little tricky. Transcendentalism was not like trying to replace Christianity by any means. I think a lot of the people who were really in this movement had Christian foundations anyways, but it was more about just like finding that divinity in and around us. It also does kind of borrow from a lot of other religions, though, and just like anywhere that there were texts about the divine, that interpretation could kind of be folded into just finding that in nature. So there was a lot of inspiration drawn from Hinduism, Buddhism, and other cultures where people could just find divinity in simple things. And the idea was to get closer to divinity by surrounding yourself in nature and immersing yourself in what's around us.
And I believe it was an offshoot of Romanticism, which we discussed in our eco-criticism episode, and we'll, I'm sure, do a Romanticism episode at some point, but they're all touching on the themes of rejecting the scientific, the methodical that was kind of the primary way of thinking at the time, and the Romantics and the Transcendentalists kind of reject that and say, hey, instead of looking at science and the scientific method, some of the divine is like, which is why it's like self-reliance. You internalize the divine, you know what you need, your intuition is important, your intuition is valuable. If we're doing the parts with Christians, you can see God more authentically in a sunrise than you could in a church with dusty pews and whatever. Like that was a lot of the beliefs, sort of rejecting the formalized part of the world that was going on with the Industrial Revolution and saying all of that is bad. You know what you need. Nature knows what you need. Go live by yourself by a pond. And that's great, apparently.
Yeah, like you can learn more about being a good human by just observing animals or leaves rather than necessarily needing to go to a church and be told, or being a part of some sort of human-led establishment. You can get that inspiration. And Romanticism was kind of in response to the same things. It was also Industrial Revolution driven. And so the same things that were driving these movements, or it was that move to these crammed living quarters in cities where people were living kind of like in the worst possible conditions. Diseases were growing. People are working at all hours. The society had just kind of evolved into this mechanized factory like situation, and people were just appalled, and they were like, wait, what are we doing? And so there were some people who were just trying to be like, let's pause as a society, what's happening, and can we reset? It's not irrelevant to what we're kind of going through today.
I was
to some
just
regards
gonna say, to me, that really harkens back to like this whole AI slop and everything is AI and technically generated. I'm like, well, wait a second, what's happening here? Maybe I just want to like make something with my hands and talk to real people. So it really resonates.
Exactly.
So maybe Taylor Swift is our Emerson in that response. No?
I mean, perhaps. I think like as we go through the songs today, I'm really interested in kind of what we've all picked very different kinds of songs. So I think it'll be interesting to see like where these threads weave in.
And I have the first song that I do think bridges the gap between some of the Romanticism and what was going on there and getting more into the Transcendentalism. Based on a quick Google, it sounds like Transcendentalism is like a direct offshoot that built on the Romantics. So that's interesting. But that was a quick Google search, so who knows? I chose literally the same song that I chose for eco-criticism, which we have not talked about the song since episode 7. So I felt like almost 120 episodes later, it was fine to revisit the song. And that is insane, yes. And that song was The Lakes. So The Lakes came out in 2020 on Folklore and was written by Jack Antonoff and Taylor Swift. And to me, to not do this song when talking about transcendentalism, it would be insane. Like, I felt like we had to do this song in the same way that we had to do the song for eco-criticism for a lot of the same reasons. But to make it more specifically transcendentalism, I wanted to compare this song with elements of Ralph Waldo Emerson's essay, I believe, or book of some. It's like a booklet, whatever. Yeah, but it's like long enough that it gets published as a book. Nature. So Nature was published in 1836, and it's one of the foundational essays that like established transcendentalism. And it does all those things that we just talked about. So, hey, we should have a more direct spiritual connection with the world. That will help us understand God. That will help us understand truth. And we need to move beyond societal conventions and develop better intuition. And nature is the source of beauty, language, spiritual discipline, really everything. And you'll see with that there's kind of, again, this rejection of society, this more self-reliance, and that's what's happening in the lakes. The whole premise of the lakes is take me to the lakes where all the poets went to die. I don't belong, and my beloved, neither do you. Those Windermere peaks look like a perfect place to cry. I'm setting off, but not without my muse. So in the lakes, she's basically leaving society and only bringing her muse along with her to go immerse herself in nature. And one of the quotes from Emerson is, "In the presence of nature, a wild delight runs through the man in spite of real sorrows. Nature says, he is my creature, and meager all his impertinent griefs, he shall be glad with me." So despite real sorrows, nature can bring a real delight. And I think that's what's happening in the lakes. Of there's a lot of sorrows. I want to go cry. I want to go do all these things. Yet she yearns for nature. She yearns for that individualism in some ways, for that self-reliance of rejecting of society. Along with that, there were a couple of other things from the essay. So one is, I'm just going to read this quote from Emerson: "Crossing a bare common in snow puddles at twilight under a clouded sky without having in my thoughts any occurrence of special good fortune, I have enjoyed a perfect exhilaration. I am glad to the brink of fear." And that immediately reminded me of "A red rose grew up out of ice-frozen ground with no one around to tweed it, while I bathe in cliffside pools with my calamitous love and insurmountable grief." So this idea of crossing a bare common in snow puddles at twilight, a red rose grew up out of ice-frozen ground. You can see this obvious comparison to, there's this like weird beauty that's happening. You can almost see like their breath in the snow and in the wintry air as they're experiencing this. But I really liked the specific sentence from Emerson of, quote, "I am glad to the brink of fear," because I think a lot of that is what's happening in the lakes, where there's so much intense emotion that it's kind of both. With my calamitous love and insurmountable grief are these big dramatic statements, which is very much of the romantics, but also transcendentalism too, of when you're so intuitive, you're, internally you know what's going on according to the transcendentalists, but also the emotions can be so big that they become other things too. And that's a lot of what's happening, I think, in the lakes. If she's having so many big emotions and they're kind of like all starting to mix together, and she needs to be in nature to experience those, to process those, to understand the truth of those. It's like only in nature can truth exist, according to transcendentalists. And in the lakes, Taylor Swift is rejecting society to go kind of find that truth, find that solace in nature. And then one other thing from Emerson, quote, "In the woods, we return to reason and faith. There I feel that nothing can befall me in life, no disgrace, no calamity which nature cannot repair." So again, no matter how bad everything else is, I can go to nature and I can be repaired there. And that made me think of what should be over burrowed under my skin in heart-stopping waves of hurt. I've come too far to watch some name-dropping sleaze tell me what are my words worth. And then that verse leads into the chorus of "Take me to the lakes where all the poets went to die." So there's all this pain, these name-dropping sleeves telling me what my words are worth. And as a reaction to that, take me to the lakes. Take me to this place where I can have my emotions, where I can have all this. I can see the truth in it. I can see the beauty in it. And nature is a place away from the horrors of the world. Also thinking of lines like "the hunters with cell phones" or "I'm not cut out for all these cynical clones." There's a clear dichotomy here that I think really ties into transcendentalism and specifically what Emerson's talking about in this essay.
I love that you brought this song back because I think this really helps me with the framing of romanticism versus transcendentalism and looking at this song through these two different lenses. My understanding is romanticism explores some darker themes and often talks more about, the divine as external and just it often gets a little bit more darker than transcendentalism, which sees humans as inherently good and this, and divine and capable of spiritual truth without dogma. And so I think looking at this song through both lenses, yes, she's saying Wordsworth and relating to Williams Wordsworth. So we know she's hearkening to the romantic specifically, but I think it's interesting to see where she bridges the gap between there is a lot of darkness in this song, but how can we look at it from that transcendentalism lens and that self-reliance, that intuition, and where she focuses on herself to get her out of the horrors and the darkness of how she's feeling.
Yeah, I think to me, the storytelling aspect of I'm going to leave society, go
Yeah.
into be nature alone. I'll bring my muse along, but this is a me journey is
Right.
where I was starting to really see that transcendentalism of
Correct.
I need to go reject it. Like you almost see her like meditating by the Windermere Peaks as she's crying, but according to the transcendentalists, through feeling those intense emotions in nature, that's the closest to divine
That you
that
can
like a
get.
human can truly get.
Right.
And she is seeking that divine, they would argue in the song. She never uses that word, but she is clearly seeking solace, some sort of truth, some sort of reprieve. And that's where I think it kind of all ties in together.
The modern day Thoreau. Take me to Walden Pond.
She's
At
just
least
from
she
the
brings her
British.
muse, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
That's
true.
true.
Not totally self-reliant. Me and my muse.
Well, only white men can be that self-reliant. Let's be real.
That's so interesting. Hot take. I do think it's interesting that we know that she's referencing the lakes because like it's very specifically like one lake and the famous lakes, and it was tied to the romantics. That's why we talked about it more in our last episode. But I think it is really interesting that the transcendentalists here also just happened to live on a body of water, or like it was also just like a part of the movement here that happened to be similar, you know, like in both instances. It's not just like forest, wood, trees, whatever. Even just the fact that there's like a body of water, there's land, there's something about that kind of environment that I think is really interesting, because Walden Pond was just such a big part of Thoreau's experience. It's fascinating that that's just where both of these movements kind of were rooted.
Yeah, and as we're talking and I'm reflecting on it even more, I'm thinking of the fact that according to Emerson and the Transcendentalist, nature really reveals truth. And when we first talked about the lakes, it was a lot about like, oh, I need to get away and heal in some ways. Like I have wounds that I need to recover from or to process. But I also think there is an element of just going really from the Taylor point of view of it, and honestly the female experience of the truth of our pain as women or as a woman in the spotlight. I mean, we saw this in the Eras Tour documentary where she was like, I can't, like really she was trying to hold in tears or trying to not show her emotions. And I think that there's something very specific about the lakes where it's I can go express my truth in nature. And for Emerson, nature reveals truth. And I think for Taylor and perhaps for women in some way, nature is where we can express our truth in a way that is freeing without judgment. The Windermere Peaks aren't going to judge you or tell you lights, camera, bitch, smile. Like it's a safe place to do that. And truth is so important to the transcendentalists. I think that there's a little bit of like slightly different shades comparing how Emerson talks about it and what we're seeing in the lakes, but I think that there might be some gender realities that are going into that as well.
Well, I have the next song. I chose to do a real tearjerker here, but Bigger Than the Whole Sky. It's our first time doing this on the pod. It was on Midnights. It was written by Jack Antonoff and Taylor Swift and came out in 2022. I was shocked that it was 2022, not 2023. Where have the last few years gone? But I think we tend to avoid a lot of the sadder songs, and now all of a sudden we're like tapping into them because we're starting to do topics and we're like, what are new things that we haven't done yet? And I came across this one as I was looking and I was like 100% yes, this is like perfect transcendentalism song, because there are a few aspects that I'm going to focus on, a few aspects of transcendentalism, like the bit about intuition and just relying on your own inner experiences, the very personal experiences that we have, and kind of trying to pour over those to understand what it means about life and our religion and our beliefs. There is this idea of a universal kind of spirit, or that there's one real divinity, like one real idea of divinity, universality of divinity, because if it's rooted in nature and nature exists kind of everywhere in the world, it's not necessarily regional or by race or anything like that. It's something that's more universal. And then there's also the idea of individualism and self-reliance. So I'm going to be touching on kind of all of those. Underlying, of course, everything in our theme today is the nature aspect. So the way that the song begins is salt streams out of my eyes and into my ears. Well, it starts with no words appear to me in the aftermath, and then it goes into that line. And to me, there's something here about just like kind of the oneness between me, myself, and nature. The song is in first person, and the salt streaming out of my eyes and ears really is this beautiful visual of an element of nature, salt water like the ocean or salty lakes, or salt itself is a mineral that's found in the ground and in the water. This idea that we are made of salt water, it really makes it feel like we are just a part of this earth and the natural things that exist. And so I think that visual is just very much ties the first person to the natural kind of experience. And then it goes, everything I touch becomes sick and sadness. Again, the I, the me, you get into the song just knowing that it's something very personal. And then it references the sea. It's all over now, all out to sea. But then the main part, which I think is kind of the most important part of this song, and it's even a part of the title, is you were bigger than the whole sky. And here, the whole sky is representative of many, many things. It is, to me, a form of divinity. In religion, we have these concepts of heavens. After one dies, they go to heaven. The sky, of course, from a natural perspective, is so expansive and just really large. You can stare up at the sky and just marvel at its vastness and how it feels like it's never ending. What's the upper limit? What's the side parameters? It's limitless. And so to say you were bigger than the whole sky is really putting someone on that same level as an almighty being, a god, somebody that lives above the clouds, but is so vast and so expansive that they can't be contained. The song is about loss of some sort. We don't know exactly what kind. We've heard it said that people talk about it being about maybe like a miscarriage, or talking about just a death of anybody whose life was cut short prematurely. We get that from you are more than just a short time. But this idea that in moments like death and birth, people especially think about the divinity, and hear the fact that she is writing this song about loss and then likening this person to a big sky. It does really feel like it's a song that has spirituality just woven into it, but in a very naturalistic way. And you see that again later on when she talks about every single thing come has turned to ashes. There is actually a reference to God.
The prayer reference of
Yes,
Yeah, that's
some
what I was
force
gonna
take you
say.
because I
Yes,
didn't
yes,
pray.
yes. Yep, I think that's what I was thinking of.
Which I think
So yeah,
really plays well into the idea of transcendentalism, where nature is more important. Nature is your
Mhm.
access to the divine, and this is like
yeah,
questioning, wait a second, was I
questioning.
supposed to be part of organized religion in order to connect to this higher power? I was supposed to pray more
Or just
in an
didn't
organized
pray
way?
enough, like regardless of
Yeah.
maybe what you pray to, because there is, I mean, during the Transcendentalist movement, it was about people moving out of the nature into urban environments where they were kind of losing touch with nature and forgetting the fabric of what makes us human. And so this idea of like not praying enough, like, did I not do something enough, or did I forget? Did I lose sight of maybe what was really important? The universality piece that I was talking about also, this idea of like, did some bird flap its wings over Asia? I thought that was really interesting because it's like something can happen somewhere far away. It's talking about the chain of events of like something happens in a distant place, but this idea that we're all connected and everything touches each other, and maybe something that happens in a very distant place that's unconnected actually is connected because it affects us somehow, I think is also just kind of lends itself to that belief system.
I've never really thought of that line either, but it also, this is a wild hot take, and we're not doing a deep dive into this right now, so we don't need to go too deep into the lines. But it's so specific because it's referring to the butterfly effect, I believe, but she
Yeah.
didn't use a butterfly. She did
No.
a bird, and she called out Asia. And it just makes me think of the pandemic and all the thoughts about like the bat in Asia starting COVID.
What a reference, Jenn.
I
Yeah.
know, that's out of nowhere, but you were just saying, I was just like, why is she saying a bird flap its wings over in Asia? It's like referencing the butterfly effect, but it's specifically a bird, it's specifically Asia, but like bats are mammals, not birds, so like also maybe not that, but I don't know, like this album came out not that long after 2022. We're still
Yeah, it was
tail
written
end
like,
of that.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's written during
it's
it,
a
so
little
I
bit
don't
more
know.
subtle. Like if she had said, did a bat flap its wings in Asia, it might have been a little too on the nose. So maybe, yeah, like maybe it is. But I think it's also like Asia just being on the opposite side of the
Yes.
world is also like, it's such a distant, complete opposite side. Like if you were like, I don't know. I mean, people forget the world is round, and like you could have just as easily said North Pole and it would have been the same distance in a different direction. But like we just don't think of it that way sometimes. And you're like, oh, what's directly behind us? It's Asia.
I do also like to the prayer and the religion thing. The line, did some force take you because I didn't pray? I also like just there's like a mysticism in transcendentalism. It's not necessarily a word they would have used, but to some of the points you were making, Maansi, of how they borrowed is the kind way to put it from other religions and religious beliefs. But the idea of some force, where she's saying some force bigger than us, but she's not naming it. She's not saying a specific god. She's not naming a specific religion. We say force of nature sometimes to refer to things. So, like, who knows what it is? But I like that there's not a clear answer there, because I do think it leads into some of the, like, you simply can't know everything about nature is part of transcendentalism, and the fact that we don't know what force did this. I don't know. Something in that I think kind of like ties in well together.
Yeah, there's definitely this element of like the cosmos, bigger things than us. There's like bigger forces than what we understand, but the way to try to understand them is to look within what is around us and look within ourselves. There's this essay that Thoreau has written about a spider web, and how spiders weave this web. And if you look really closely at how the spider makes that web and then the patterns that come up in that web, I believe maybe he talks about raindrops on the spider web or something. But like then I think there's like comparisons to that shape in other places. You start to see those designs and that geometry in many other places around you. And I think there's the idea is that there is this universality. Like you want to understand your thumbprint, like you'll see it in different places. You see the same shapes repeat themselves. And I think this idea that when you're talking about the large sky, you're talking about something that happened somewhere else, you're thinking about something happening that you just can't explain, but at the same time using words like ashes and salt and things that people do understand. That's kind of like the gap that you're bridging with that unknown cosmic level to like something that's really tangible around us in our worlds that everybody knows, like something that's really, really basic and elemental.
I love it. I also just want to point out, listeners, so the way we typically choose our deep dives is literally right before we hit record. We're like, oh, which song should we deep dive? And we did this today. And we deep dive the lakes. So episode 8 is our lakes deep dive, which I should have said. So check that out. So we're like, it's between the song that Jodi's about to talk about or Bigger Than the Whole Sky. And we were all like, so not Bigger Than the Whole Sky.
Bigger Than the Whole
Very
Sky.
Unanimous.
Yeah.
Maybe
Although
someday,
I will say,
but we're not there right now.
Well done. It was a great song to pick for this topic. So there was no question that this was the right time to bring in that song. Just not the right time for a deep dive. One day when all of our cycles are synced and we're in the right point and we need a good cry, we will deep dive Bigger Than the Whole Sky. How does that sound?
We've had a lot of sad songs lately. And we're just
it was just so funny to me. It was like, so what do we deep dive? I was like, oh, we just did the lakes. We've done the lakes already. Pause. and not bigger
Not
than
that
the whole
one.
sky.
Well,
No.
I'll rip the Band-Aid off on my song. And
Oh,
you'll
wait,
probably
actually,
see
before you
why.
rip the Band-Aid, can I just
Okay.
say one more thing? Because I
Of
saw a
course.
note and I didn't get a chance to talk about it. Sorry. The other thing
It's
is
called building anticipation. It's good.
the one other thing that I wanted to say, because also Earth Day, there is I don't think this is strictly transcendentalism, but this idea that Earth is a mother, that concept of Mother Earth, I wanted to just call out because for a lot of people, I briefly mentioned this, when they hear this song, they think about miscarriages or losing children at a young age. It's something about like a life that is cut short, and who has a short life is younger people. And so I think that connection also, like regardless of what the song is really about, the fact that we also think of Earth being a mother and this feeling like a really natural song, and the fact that Taylor is our mother as well. Just
All well done.
If we were a TV show, we'd cut to commercial right now before we said what Jodi's song is.
Well, we do have ads, so maybe we'll put an ad break right there.
I was just going to say.
Anyway, with that, drum roll, please. I'm going to take a hard pivot from Bigger Than the Whole Sky. I'm doing Opalite. Yay, Opalite.
Yay!
Very big pivot.
Very big
Now
pivot
we're
that we
bopping
need.
now.
Exactly. We're moving and shaking. We might dance through this one. So Opalite came out in 2025 on The Life of a Showgirl, written by Taylor Swift, Max Martin, and Shellback. This is track 3. Transcendentalists, as we have all already discussed today, like they read the natural world like a text filled with lessons. They see lessons in everything in nature. They also see that humans are fundamentally connected to the divine and need to look inward for all of the answers, that you are born with the answers. You don't need to turn to the sages or the scholars or religion in order to get the answers to life, that you just have to live your life and live through your experiences and maybe like go touch grass and you will have all of the answers that you need. Is touch grass not the perfect transcendentalist phrase?
So good. That is there's a teacher out there who listens to us who's going to hear that and be like, thank you.
And we talk about being relevant to today. I think there is a reason that this is a concept that's coming up right now, because
also,
the digital
maybe
age...
that's the title of this episode. Go touch grass, Transcendentalists and Taylor Swift. Also, if anybody wants to write a book on Transcendentalism and Taylor Swift, make it called Touch Grass. Anyway, so we've talked a lot about Emerson today. I reread Self-Reliance. And there were a couple quotes that stood out to me that I think relate to this song, because I think this song has a lot to do with self-reliance. But my spoiler alert is also, is this song an anti-transcendentalist song? I don't know. We'll find out together. But the quote in particular, a man should learn to detect and watch that gleam of light which flashes across his mind from within more than the luster of the firmament of bards and sages. Again, just saying, like, trust your own instinct and your own experience. Rely on yourself, not on what really fancy people or bards and sages and wisdom and religion tell you. Trust thyself. Every heart vibrates to that iron string. Again, trust yourself and your own experiences. So big focus on intuition, personal experience. But all that being said, I initially picked this song because of the nature imagery prominent in the chorus and the bridge. And that's particularly what I'll focus on today, because we will deep dive it, and also because that's where the nature imagery is. The song is clearly inspired by the natural world. But what I want us to explore together is, does it see nature as the miracle and the positive thing? Or is it the human-made and the man-made that is positive in this song? So is this song an acceptance of transcendentalism, or is it a rejection of transcendentalism? And we will explore and figure that out together. And I also at first was like, oh, maybe I need to change it if it's a rejection of transcendentalism. I'm like, no, this is our podcast. If the theme is transcendentalism, maybe we see if this song is a rejection of transcendentalism.
I love this challenge. Great challenge.
Right? Okay.
Also, so you kept talking about being true to yourself, and I was like, why is to thine own self be true so locked in my head? And I'm like, oh, it's from Hamlet,
which we talked about, which we also did, which is also in The Life of a Showgirl.
Exactly.
Yeah, and Emerson name dropped Shakespeare and is like, would Shakespeare be Shakespeare if he learned from a guy named Shakespeare? No, Shakespeare because he listened to himself and was true to his own self, which, white men puffing up white men. But, whatever.
All of us roll our eyes, like, literally.
Yeah, it's so funny because I was reading this and I was like, oh, all these things kept, I remembered reading this in high school and in college. And I'm like, yeah. But then you read it with another perspective now, being a 30-something female in the world. And I'm like, of course you thought you could rely on yourself. Like, you're a white man. Like,
But
you
also,
can,
like,
you can.
Who's ever heard of Shakespeare copying anybody?
Yeah, that's so funny to me. Shakespeare just listened to himself, yes, and there's one completely new story that we know he wrote, and every other story had previous iterations.
Anyway, this is about modern day Shakespeare, Taylor Swift. So let's get to the chorus, bringing it right back. Okay, so the chorus. But my mama told, I'm just going to read the chorus through and then we'll go line by line. But my mama told me it's all right. You were dancing through the lightning strikes, sleepless in the onyx night. But now the sky is opalite. Oh, my Lord, never made no one like you before. You had to make your own sunshine. But now the sky is opalite. Uh-oh. Okay, so line by line. It's all right. You were dancing through the lightning strikes. So basically, you were staying positive. It's all right. It's okay. You were staying positive. You kept moving despite the bad, the wild things that life was trying to throw at you. So nature here, these lightning strikes are seen as negative, and it's saying that it's okay. You were positive. You stayed moving through all the negative things that nature threw at you. I don't believe that transcendentalists saw nature necessarily as negative. They saw it as awe-inspiring and with lessons. And I think here we do have lessons learned from life.
Yeah.
But it's not nature as like you will learn. I mean, I don't know. We'll see. You're definitely learning about yourself through the lightning strikes. Sleepless in the onyx night. So onyx is a natural stone that actually has undertones of sorrow and misfortune. There's a lot of different symbolism within onyx. It's a deep black stone that often symbolizes strength, protection, self-control. It's a stone for enduring difficult times and provides mental and perpetual fortitude. It's also known as a worry stone, and it does have these historical undertones of sorrow and misfortune. So sleepless in the onyx night, night is being portrayed as dark and difficult, moody. Again, we're seeing negative here, that something kept you awake, nature as dark. But now the sky is opalite. So opalite is a man-made stone meant to mimic natural opal. Opalite is this milky white blue because opal is milky light blue. But now, so this is all saying that the sky is man-made. It is not natural, but it is lighter and more clear. Oh, my Lord, never made no one like you before. So we have an idea of creation here, that God has never done this. God has never made you someone who can, dance through the lightning strikes. You are original. You are unique, and God can't do this.
I must admit, it is in this moment I realized it was made, not met.
It changes. It changes.
But every time I hear her sing "Never Made No One," I was like, she's pronouncing "met" weird in that particular version.
So I love that you say that, because I saw that when the lyric video came out, and I remember sitting in the theater and seeing the lyric video and seeing that the first chorus is "made no one like you before," and the second chorus is "never met no one like you before," and that's when I realized how intentional she is with every single word. Mm-hmm. And I'm so excited we're going to deep dive this, because the chorus changes. She's talking to different people in the chorus. Different people are talking in the chorus, and that's why. But in this particular chorus, God never made no one, my Lord never made no one like you before.
Yeah. I think that to answer your earlier question about
before you answer my question, let me finish the chorus.
I will wait.
Well, let me finish the chorus, because I think it helps. You had to make your own sunshine. So again, man, woman, I'm using man in the non-gendered terminology here, so I don't have to keep saying the word human, which kind of creeps me out, because then I'm like, whatever. Man-made over nature-made. You had to create your own sunshine. God created sunshine. Let there be light. But you had to create your own sunshine. But now the sky is opalite. So nature and natural here throughout this chorus is seen as difficult, challenging. You're learning a lot of lessons from it, but it's the human, the you, that has to overcome everything that nature has thrown at you and make your own life and create your own sunshine. So this whole thing is like recognizing the awe and the power of nature, but seeing greater power in the human-made experiences and not letting nature win or take over. So is it an acceptance of transcendentalism? A little bit. Is it a rejection of transcendentalism? A little bit. I don't know, Maansi, what do you think?
Yeah, I actually think that it's an acceptance. And the reason that I'm leaning that way is I see a difference between man-made and nature-made. It kind of depends on whether it's an internal or external thing. So, for example, if like the opalite actual stone is man-made for sure. It involved man using technology or tools or something to artificially craft something. However, in the context of this song, when we're saying that you are making your own sunshine and you are turning darker times or poor circumstances into something positive in a metaphorical sense, the transformation is really happening internally, and it's not using external like man-made tools to do that. It feels like a transformation based on perspective. And to me, that is exactly what transcendentalism is about. It is about relying on yourself and what you know about nature and transforming your thought to find divinity and positivity through what's around you. I think so. So here, like I definitely, if there was a if this was a literal song where man created this incredible room where they could change the color of the sky from dark to light with a switch that you turn on and you're like, now the sky is opalite, I would be like, rejection. Of transcendentalism. But because it is a metaphor and it's internal, I think it very much is supporting.
Yeah. Jen, what do you think?
That also makes me very randomly think of kind of how context matters, because it makes me think of, very funnily, a thing I saw online about like, oh, my cat was doing the like fix this meow and took me to the window telling me to turn off the rain. And I said, silly cat, I can't turn off the rain. Then I went to the bathroom and turned on the indoor rain. And like how, like we're the cat in this scenario in some ways of like, it's water coming from the sky,
No different.
Yeah, and I do think the self-reliance, I'm not super well versed in transcendentalism, so it's not an answer I can say confidently, but I do think that the self-reliance and the individualism, like I believe there's a pretty well-backed argument that a lot of our pull yourself up by your bootstraps Protestant work ethic is also tied into transcendentalism, because it is a lot of individualism, a lot of self-reliance. I mean, the whole essay is titled Self-Reliance. And so the idea of, oh, there's a storm of lightning and you're dancing your way through it and you're surviving and you're making your own sunshine, like that's self-reliance, baby.
Yeah, self-reliance.
Exactly. Yeah,
exactly. Like you could see Ralph Waldo Emerson like singing this song.
Yeah. But like that's the thing, is that if it was, I also, because I just watched Frankenstein yesterday, so this is very top of mind. Like talk about a scenario where man is like, I'm going to create death. Like I'm going to capture this lightning strike and turn it into something. Not transcendentalism. When you're like actually manipulating something in nature. I think if you were manipulating something external, it would be different. But this is a song that's very much about internal transformation.
Yeah, and I think it's a song that's about intuition and personal experience and lived experience, which is very transcendentalist. It is a self-reliant song, right? You're saying literally you have to make your own sunshine. You have to make your own happiness. Like that's the definition of self-reliance. And I think this song recognizes the awe and power of nature and the natural world and respects the natural world. I don't think that the sky being opalite is literally saying it's mimicking opal. It's mimicking nature. That's a reverence for nature. It's just saying, hey, nature was throwing me lightning strikes and storms inside a teacup. I made something that
better
looks like nature, but I had to find it in my own way.
Yeah.
Like your man is not going to your point, Jen, like turn off the rain and turn off the lightning storms. But what can I do? I can make my own sunshine in whatever that looks like for me. And I'll just briefly bring up the bridge, because that was the other part that I think referenced, the nature elements. This the first part of the bridge. This is just a storm inside a teacup, but shelter here with me, my love, thunder like a drum. This life will beat you up, 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 up. So basically saying that like life is hard. Storm inside a teacup is another way to say tempest in a teacup, that like you're blowing things out of proportion, but she's specifically using nature imagery to saying like this feels a lot bigger than it actually is, but I will keep you safe. We will be safe together. Thunder like a drum. thundering, it's beating, it's huge. This life will be hard, but basically, like, this is a temporary speed bump. Failure brings you freedom, and I can bring you love. Don't you sweat it, baby. Like, again, life is hard. Nature will throw us a lot of things, storms, thunder, but together we'll figure it out.
I'm so excited to deep dive this
I
song.
know, me too.
And before we record that episode, we all need to
Listen to it and dance.
Well, that and like pull up pictures of Opalite. And listeners,
really
if
pretty.
you are some of our weekly listeners, before next week, pull up some pictures of Opalite and look at it, because I think it's a fascinating choice for the color of a sky being Opalite. And I'm interested to look into that.
It's beautiful. I have a lot
beautiful.
of pictures of the sky that look like that. Actually, I have a couple paintings of sunrises and sunsets where you see the changing of the yellow into the blue.
Yeah, it's just like she didn't say aquamarine or turquoise or any of these
No,
things.
it's
Just
opalite.
Opalite is so specific of a choice.
Also,
And opal itself is not a super like well-known or oft-referenced.
Well, opal
gem.
has a lot of negative potential comment. It's like a very
I was just gonna
mysterious.
say, it's always a
connotation. Like,
cursed stone.
you're not
Okay,
supposed
well, it's
to
my
buy,
birthstone, so
Right,
we
well-
need to calm down.
but you're not supposed to
Are you
buy
cursed?
yourself opals, I
Probably.
believe.
Yes, exactly. Like it can be gifted to you, but it was also in Harry Potter. There's a opal reference. There's I think that cursed necklace maybe was made of opals.
Oh, interesting.
I don't remember exactly which one now, or maybe it was something.
The Horcrux? Or the
nurse,
one that she's
yeah.
given. Yeah, I just watched that. I know you're a purist and only read the books, but I just watched the movie because.
Yes, which we can discuss next week. One other general thing that I wanted to say that is more of a shout out to my husband and not as much about Taylor, but as we're talking about this, it's something that has always struck me about the transcendentalists, and I probably can still relate this to Taylor, is yes, we know that there's benefit in being in nature. Like that is just an objectively true thing. Go touch grass, go outside, go breathe the fresh air. That's good. However, a lot of the transcendentalists and their individualism got into like that self-reliance of cutting off society, and that's not good for you. And one of the things that Chris has been talking about lately, ever since we moved to a bigger city, is urban ecology, and he does city planning. So this idea of how can cities have people live in community, so have greater density, but also set aside spaces for those kind of transcendent nature moments. And I just thought that it's been really interesting as he's been like thinking about it and talking about it and just talking about the transcendentalists back then and how relevant it is now. And sometimes it feels like an either or of like, I'm going to go live in a cabin out of the woods, or I'm going to be in the middle of the city, but like, I don't know the last time I touched grass. And I just thought it's been really interesting. Like there's a whole field of study, and there are a lot of people who are trying to really work through how to build cities that support community and nature. And I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, we're kind of having like a return to our roots kind of moment around the board. Like that's why this is so relevant to today. But like the concept of the village, for example, is an interesting one, because village back in the day, literally, like in some cultures, it means city. A ville in France was the city, like that was the town, city, or whatever. But a village, like these days, there's still countries that have villages. When I go to India, so if somebody says, oh, that person's from the village, you're actually saying they're out from like a rural area somewhere. But it wasn't actually, it was a mix. It was like people who had agricultural lives and lived in nature, but they lived in community together. And like when you say it takes a village, it's because there were a lot of people there living together. It wasn't isolated. So it's really interesting. The one other thing that I also wanted to call out is that, Jodi, when you were talking about that line about the drum, specifically the thunder and the drum, made me think of looking up which mythologies or religions may attribute thunder to somebody beating a drum. And it's almost all of them is the answer. Like there's like Native American religions, there's like Japanese religion. I know the Hindu reference of this. There's like several cultures that do that. A lot of indigenous cultures did that. So just like another idea of like divinity in nature and like a universality.
Well, that is all we have for you on this very transcendentalist episode of AP Taylor Swift. Join us next week as we deep dive Opalite. That's all we have for you today on AP Taylor Swift. Be sure to rate and review us on your favorite podcast app, Follow us on your social channel of choice at AP Taylor Swift to stay up to date. And join us next time as we overanalyze and deep dive into the next Taylor Swift song on AP Taylor Swift.